we begin abruptly on a silent scene of blue cliffs. Little bubbles rise towards the surface as the sun shines down from above. Before long, we figure out how to maneuver our submarine and venture out into the unknown. Below us, the barren seafloor passes by in repeating patterns. We keep going. We see some scattered fish far away. We keep going, following the geometry of the seascape. We keep going. We keep going. We keep going. And nothing happens. This is Aquanauts Holiday, a PlayStation title released in Japan in June 1995 before Sony published it worldwide the following year. Developed by the revered studio Art Inc., Aquanauts Holiday fits right in with the rest of their repertoire of experimental and unconventional game concepts, like the hot air balloon simulator No Time of Wind, the chain reaction platformer No One Can Stop Mr. Domino, the building block fighting game Topolo, or their flagship railway manager A-Train. Games that celebrate the mundane with as much playful quirkiness as stone-faced sobriety. In Aquanauts Holiday, you quite simply cruise around in a nondescript submarine to explore the secrets of the ocean. There is no conflict, no violence, no danger, no stakes, no time limit, no pressure, no demands, no loss, no failure, no nothing. Only you and the big blue. Silent, intimate, and peaceful. By all means, with its scaled-down design, Aquanauts Holiday is an unassuming game, possibly a bit quaint by modern eyes, but in the mid-90s, it was an unprecedented idea, practically avant-garde. It seems people didn't quite know what to make of it. For as much praise the game garnered, there was an equally harsh backlash against it. After all, it's easy to look at all of this nothingness and preclude that since there are no tasks, there is no goal. And with no goal, there is no point. For example, in a Usenet thread from October 1998 about the worst PlayStation games, poster Mark C. derisively summarized Aquanauts Holiday with the following words.
Imagine a game of having nothing to do except swim around and look at the pretty fish?
Yes, Mark. Imagine that. Of course, we may laugh at this quote today by pointing at how it evidently finds disgust in something so innocent and benign, that doing nothing but swim around and look at fish would be statement enough for why it qualifies as worst of the worst. And yes, it is funny. But at the same time, we find Mark C's post to be a perfect encapsulation of the video game landscape Aquanauts Holiday arrived in, a time where design minimalism was received with bewilderment and suspicion. And that's no exaggeration. Looking at contemporary discourse around the game, we can see how the very premise itself made it stick out like no other. In fact, Aquanauts Holiday was so new and unique that numerous reviewers, even people praising it, ended up questioning if it could even be defined as a game at all, because they had never seen anything like it before.
While Aquanauts Holiday is not a game in the traditional sense, it certainly provided many a gamer with hours of relaxing fun.
It can't really be described as a game, as there's not really any objective other than to attract fish to your reef and explore the ocean.
Then there are those who occasionally try to foist upon us the idea that consoles don't have to be for games, that we can simply have an experience within a piece of software's polygonal world. That's what the Aquanauts Holiday is supposed to be, an experience.
In fact, it's not really a game, at least strictly speaking anyway.
Looking more like a therapeutic cable access show than a video game, Aquanauts Holiday will have you grooving to new age music as you build your underwater sanctuary.
This is a tough one to talk about in a games magazine since, for all intensive purposes, it's not a game.
These are the main pleasure areas of the game, or piece of interactive entertainment, or whatever you want to call it, around which most of the action takes place.
Faktum är att Aquanauts Holiday inte är ett vanligt spel, utan mer en interaktiv nöjestripp som efterlämnar ett stort lugn.
Was schreibe ich? Dies ist kein Spiel, sondern ein Ausstellungsobjekt.
The Aquanauts Holiday promotes itself as a game with no set goals, no rules, and no end. A description which leaves one wondering what exactly it is. It's not a screensaver because it puts you in, excuse the cliche, a fully interactive environment. And although it offers the player the opportunity to learn a bit about the ocean, you wouldn't class it as educational software. Even that elfish program for computers doesn't come near. The closest description I could come up with is a sedated, submerged sim city with no traffic problems. But it's best to leave all preconceptions aside and dive in with an open mind.
4 out of 10. Should have put some gameplay in.
Well, you get the point. In a time of ridge racing, virtua fighting, tomb raiding, chrono triggering, and jumping flashing with 64 distinct flavors of Super Mario, it's safe to say that Aquanauts Holiday didn't exactly fit the mold. Games were loud, number-crunching challenges with overt goals and sometimes violent means. Even titles that delved into moodier atmospheres and dignified framing commonly had a through line for what the player was supposed to do, or really the expectation that the player would do anything at all. Aquanauts Holiday doesn't have that. It wordlessly drops us into the vastness of the ocean and lets us figure out the rest for ourselves. It is up to the player to discover firsthand that nothing is waiting for them. At least not anything they would commonly expect. In its simplicity, Aquanauts Holiday followed none of the conventions that had come to shape the core definitions of what even makes a game a game. I understand why reviewers at the time were left a bit dumbfounded by it. Their frame of reference was so vastly different that at least 5 publications unironically brought up the strategy town builder SimCity as the closest comparison. The juxtaposition may seem nonsensical at first, but it makes sense if you think about it for a bit. SimCity is a relatively peaceful game, one where you predominantly work to create rather than destroy. Your tools are freeform and the play space open-ended enough for you to create just about anything. Yet, between long-form plans and financing, you're expected to show restraint and patience. It's a game about observing and waiting as much as it is about building and managing. In that sense, Aquanauts Holiday is much the same. We are given free reins for what to do and where to go, but the journey is long and often fruitless. We must stumble in the dark, waiting for our submarine to arrive at points of interest. Aquanauts Holiday and SimCity may have little to no aesthetic similarities, but they both promote a form of meditative stillness through playing them, which links them at a deeper level. Despite the palpable genre differences, our approach as players remains the same. Having said that, the SimCity comparison evidently still carries a large dose of desperation, which only helps to further prove the uniqueness of Aquanauts Holiday. If this is the nearest equivalent to that, then we certainly are swimming in uncharted waters. Granted, that doesn't mean Aquanauts Holiday is completely without precedent, or that SimCity would necessarily be its closest relative. 3 decades of hindsight allows us a luxurious 2020 overview, which game writers back in the day couldn't even dream of, but we digress. At the time, Aquanauts Holiday stood out among its contemporaries like no other, perplexing audiences and evading sensible descriptions. A peaceful and relaxing game, simple and undemanding, where your only mission objective is to float around aimlessly among the digital sea life. Aquanauts Holiday, a game where you vibe in the moment and revel in the bliss of doing absolutely nothing.
Or is it?
Part 1 Pacific.
Now, contrary to what you may have been led to believe from this past introduction, with its heavy focus on contemporary reception, it has to be noted that Aquanauts Holiday is in fact a game. It has conventional game elements. There are tasks for your controller fiddling hands. You absolutely do stuff while playing. For lack of a better term, it qualifies as being gamey. You're not just cruising around in your submersible. You can sing with the fish to elicit reactions from them, and you set up buoys that serve as strategic fast travel locations. Those little dials indicate real data, and you can use them for navigation. When returning to base, you might want to manage your ever-growing map by color tagging dispatched buoys from the last expedition and charting your next trip into new undiscovered territory. Heck, there is an entire construction mode where you build an artificial coral reef, which I now realize may be the real reason for all those SimCity comparisons. Oh well. These little tasks in turn serve a greater purpose. During your time with Aquanauts Holiday, you will make progress towards a main objective, the completion of which triggers the end credits. Yes, despite the practical urban legends for the contrary, Aquanauts Holiday does in fact have an ending, and ultimately, you're actually doing something and not nothing. The game merely has a minimal presentation that hides all of this from the player, convincing us that the waters are shallow until we take the plunge and discover the unseen depths for ourselves. One could, feasibly, float around cluelessly for hours without figuring any of this out. Even returning to the base and recording the save file is hidden behind a semi-cryptic double select tap, making it likely some players never even figured out where the pause button is. So yes, I can see why Aquanauts Holiday has garnered its avant-garde, minimalist reputation. For all intents and purposes, it prioritizes the sparse, clean exterior over the conventional systems kept close to its heart. In a sense, we must find a game within Aquanauts Holiday in order to properly play it. I understand this unveiling of the underlying structure may feel a bit disappointing. Like I'm ruining the magic of this elusive non-game by exposing it as a boring, regular game. Not quite as unique, radical, or provocative as one would have hoped. I know, it's always too good to be true. Luckily though, there is no cynicism behind this expose. On the contrary, this is our opportunity to highlight Aquanauts Holiday as a masterful work of game design. One which remains brilliant to this day as a conventional open-world exploration title, while also serving as a bold and effective piece of genuine minimalism. I guess somewhat non-surprisingly, Aquanauts Holiday indeed remains barren and understated despite having something to do in it. Those 90s reviewers weren't exactly lying after all. And we'll come clean, for years we too assumed that there wasn't that much going on in Aquanauts Holiday. We just kinda took it as an intentionally barren and featureless game where you float around in nothingness. And look at fish, as it were. Was the world intricately designed or procedurally generated? Did the fauna have designated biomes or were they randomly popping in? Were there secrets to find and features beyond our knowledge? Was there anything at all going on here? For whatever reason, we simply read Aquanauts Holiday as a minimal statement and left it at that. Commendably minimal, I might add. But mysteriously, we never examined it further, even though it absolutely should have intrigued us more, as we will explore later on in Chapter 3. However, last year, by a sudden influx of curiosity, Kiki decided to finally sit down and properly play Aquanauts Holiday. Kiki being my co-producer and the person who wrote the script.
Me?
That's why I say we a lot, because it's actually just me relaying what Kiki is saying. Duo projects, woohoo!
Can you believe some people think you write all of our scripts?
Well, as we found out, we being my wife, Aquanauts Holiday is a splendidly enchanting game if you stick with it for more than 10 minutes and allow it to fully envelop you. Make time for yourself. Turn off the lights. Get comfy. The comforting blue stillness of Aquanauts Holiday will seep out into the room and embrace you with its secure softness as tranquility enraptures your senses. Beyond its peaceful veneer, the game equally carries a philosophical profundity that will surely make an impression and remain in your mind for years after that first encounter. A great conversational piece for open-minded players to muse upon over a bottle of fine wine well into the small hours perhaps. A refined pastime for grown-ups, one might say. We may talk broadly around all of the ideas conveyed within Aquanauts Holiday, treating it holistically as a statement rather than an experience. But what is it like to play Aquanauts Holiday? Is it enjoyable as a game, or merely enjoyable as an idea? Obviously, the best way to find that out is to pause the video and play it yourself for a bit. But I know you're not gonna do that. I know. So instead, we'll have to recreate that experience for you as best we can in video form to make you know what the game has to offer and understand what playing it entails, to truly make you feel like an aquanaut. So put on those bikinis, boys. We're going swimming. I begin once more at that silent scene with the blue cliffs. This is the view after being dispatched from the undersea base. I can turn around and take a closer look at it. It's a nice base. You can't really do anything with it, but I like it. This base is located within an enclosed cliffside balcony, leaving me only one direction to progress. I descend into a big, open, flat space. A veritable wasteland, one might say. Although, this place is actually barren for a reason. It's where our artificial reef will be built. But for now, let's move on. I must traverse this area west of the base for a little while before the terrain starts changing. Apart from fleeting schools of fish in the distance, this place feels lonely. I reach the edge. This little starting area is a plateau, so to see the rest of the world, I need to drop down, quite far. Down here, the environment slightly shifts. There is a mossy green seabed bringing with it new colors. After drifting a bit, I see numerous fish and some bushes of seaweed. They stick out as significant in the desolate environment. I stop the submarine and stay here for a bit. There's a dolphin. I press the shoulder buttons to sing with it. Pushing L1 makes the dolphin do excited loops. It gets all close and friendly with me, allowing me a better look at it. We initiate some strange dance where I sing, they frolic, before moving away and I sing again to make them come back. Every sea creature will have one preferred tone of the 4 shoulder buttons. 2 of them don't elicit any reaction, while another one will make them go away. I press L2. The dolphin leaves. I move on. The green seabed changes along with the shape of the terrain. A hypnotic beat approaches from somewhere far away. It stays with me for an indeterminate amount of time before softly fading out without me noticing it. Aquanauts Holiday certainly relishes in its hazy presentation. It cleverly employs the draw distance of the PlayStation by conveying it as murky water. This makes no scene fully complete, as there's always more to see in the distance. In turn, my curiosity is fueled. At all times, I feel like something may be awaiting me close by, around the next corner, just out of view. I see some turtles. I carefully approach. I try to sing once more with the shoulder buttons. When I press R1, they stop and do a little spin. We continue this routine for a bit. I like my new turtle friend, but I will leave her alone. Ahead is a manta ray. We repeat a similar procedure. I get to watch it real up close. Too close, in fact. I continue moving southwest. In the distance, I spot a whale, and later a swordfish. I make no effort in approaching them. I allow them to be in peace. As I progress, the terrain starts rising until I reach a mountain. Well, it's not a mountain, but rather an island. But I suppose that's what all islands truly are. Aquanauts Holiday does not allow the player to ascend to the surface, so I'm left to wonder what this island looks like from above. It will remain a mystery. As I circle the landmass, I feel like I'm circumventing a mountain range. The world seems huge. It should be, if such a massive hurdle can just lie in the way and quickly become lost in its wilderness, forgotten as I venture onwards. Look at these brownish bushes. It's been a while since I saw anything like this. It's an utterly mundane sight, but how could I not take notice of them? I guess there's some form of coral formation. I'm not too knowledgeable about this to say for certain, so let's call them bushes for simplicity's sake. I leave the mundane bushes. The landscape keeps expanding further onwards. My mind wanders as the scene repeats forever and ever. It's peaceful. I involuntarily absorb this tranquility through my passive playing. Eventually, my mind wanders so far that I stop thinking about anything at all. Strange red flora appear before me. They contrast nicely against the blue ocean. I enjoy this vista. I stay here for a while and watch the fish drift past my screen. They make for good company. It seems staying still will make the sea life more comfortable with you and crowd the screen. Maybe I can stop at any place and have them appear before me. Wouldn't that be nice? I'd like that. The expedition continues. The further I go, the more my sense of self vanishes. I become less aware that I'm sitting in front of the TV, no less that I'm supposed to be operating a submarine. I simply exist in this tranquil moment of maritime bliss. The world is huge and empty, but I am at rest. I am content. Suddenly, the scenery changes. A pale white substance spreads out beneath me. It looks like an underwater desert. Without hesitation, I step straight into its expanse. This place looks special. I've traveled quite far and encountered relatively little, yet this implication of a new biome is enough to make me satisfied. It's gorgeous. I float around playfully in this little undersea desert before climbing the cliffs beyond it. At the top, I see yet more sand and decide to... What is that? At the southwest corner of the world, past the sandy stretches, lies a mysterious set of columns, indicating some form of Greek ruins. An Atlantean Parthenon. What is this place? Why is it here? Who put it here? Does it hold any significance? Can I do anything with this? Am I rewarded for finding it? The game hands me no response, apart from the ghastly vision of this landmark monument. My questions abound, but they don't matter. It's a sight of beauty. It is mine. I feel like I earned it. I don't need it to have any greater significance than that. Yet, at the same time, I want to keep this. I want to highlight the occasion. So I dispatch a buoy, marking this as a point of significance. I do not want this place to get lost in the wilderness of the ocean. I make this note for me and myself only. It has no meaning apart from what I assign to it. Aquanauts Holiday has nothing to say here. It has no expectations of my actions. Yet, in that resigned position, it has spoken more loudly than any other open world game I've ever played. It has made me care deeply about its spatiality, made me wonder about its vastness, and made me go out of my way to capture a memory. It made me create meaning within it. I return to base after a successful expedition. I review the map. A feeble spaghetti string connects the base with this one remote corner. The world is tremendously massive. What could possibly await me out there? Nothing of significance, sure. Nothing that advances some form of narrative or pats me on the head for a job well done. Just an ocean of fish, endless vistas and profundity for myself to create. The exhilaration of breaking the mellow silence with the figurative loudness of a strange and unnerving landmark has made me invested in seeing more. I feel like every trip may yield yet new discoveries. The ocean is vast and unknown. It is there for me to discover again and again. Maybe one day I will make sense of it. But for now, I'm happy exploring and wondering. How romantic. While this is merely a microcosm sample of what playing Aquanauts Holiday is like, I believe you get the gist. The experience keeps on like this in lengthy, hypnotic sessions without much happening. Not every expedition will yield magnificent results. It's common to not really discover anything. Sometimes I unwittingly twist my tail and end up back where I started. However, I accept and embrace those fruitless ventures, because the knowledge that marvelous sights await me out there is motivation enough. With patience, the murky waters will disperse into the sight of some mysterious dreamlike artifact. My anticipation is ever present and justified. It keeps me going. And just like that, we'll find that an hour or two has suddenly drifted away. The peaceful presence of the game has left us with a sense of calm. Ultimately, the experience was a relaxing one. When we then exit back to the title screen, Aquanauts Holiday makes a point out of this notion by displaying screens overtly commenting on itself. Do you feel peaceful? Do you still have stress? Time to return to real life. Even though a playful distraction, please play again. Through these text nuggets, it's clear that Aquanauts Holiday is framed as a game about relaxation. Not necessarily thematically, but rather as a vessel for achieving that effect within us as players. This becomes more obvious when we delve into the paratext. Looking at the back of the European cover, the game is succinctly described as a crazy, loved-up chill-out, while the Japanese cover of course has Nonbiri shitai hitomo. Meanwhile, the North American cover has a bullet point about amplifying the Zen experience as the original New Age music deepens your meditation. A statement that I presume is purely coincidental with how numerous outlets conspicuously refer to the soundtrack as being New Age. Oh, I'm onto you. Don't think I didn't notice. Looking into the manual, the game's intentions are made even more clear with striking key phrases like take a deep breath and sense your whole being relax. Enjoy the drifting sea life and calming currents. Or tranquility floods your being. Included is a little backstory giving context to your intended role in the game, as a world-famous marine biologist who takes on a mission of solitude to escape their stressful, overworked life. Your orders are to explore, experience, and relax, while the absence of requirements and interferences are firmly punctuated. Just you and the deep blue. In these reassurances, Aquanauts Holiday reveals a curious, individualist approach. After all, if there are no demands, we must define the experience for ourselves. The introduction ends with a mysterious, whatever happens next is up to you. And throughout the manual, we are encouraged to pay close attention and experiment with the game's systems, to actively use what is being handed to us, to always be ready for more discoveries. Using phrases like, be creative, and above all, have fun, and this is your holiday. We are firmly reminded that there is no right or wrong way to play, no clear intended path. As the hint pages confidently states, each player will experience Aquanauts Holiday differently. I suppose this is a notion that applies to all games in one way or another, but when expressed so overtly by Aquanauts Holiday, it feels more meaningful, more intentional and sincere. It's always a nice idea that we can approach these interactive experiences in our own unique ways, but typically we end up railroaded and bottlenecked into set outcomes by the various hurdles and requirements in our way. How free are we truly if we all strive for the same goal? How is freedom even expressed if we are trying to fulfill a mission objective? Aquanauts Holiday presents an answer to this problem, and thankfully, it doesn't compromise the game's integrity. At the tail end of the manual sits a solitary reef building tip. When the number of fish on your reef reaches the maximum limit, something special happens. There are over 120 types of fish to discover, so stick with it!
Yay!
This is the only firm task the game ever hands you, presenting a set requirement and promising a reward for completing it. The manual does previously mention this reef building, but there it's in a more recreational light, not indicating there to be some grander purpose resting behind it. In truth, filling out your artificial reef's biodiversity constitutes the win conditions for Aquanauts Holiday. At least if we count the end credits as winning the game. You may not agree, and I'd understand your point, but for the sake of conversation, let's just define it as such. Get fish to win. The central question in our quest of beating this holiday thus follows. How do we attract more fish to our reef? Well, it partly relies on semi-hidden features which are never plainly elaborated on, though the manual softly outlines the rules enough for us to understand the following. When building the reef, we use colorful blocks of red, blue, and yellow in creative configurations. The 3 individual colors supposedly attract different kinds of sea life, so it's important to balance their distribution. The size of the reef logically affects its total population. Thus, we need to gather as many blocks as possible for building material. Now, I'm not fully certain if blocks are exclusively contributing factors to the populace, as I've noticed some fauna follow me back to the base. Likewise, I'm not sure if there's more than one way of gaining more blocks, since the manual implies they might simply grow on their own based on the fish? However, the most surefire route to increasing my block meter is exploration. The manual states as much, and our play experiences corroborates it. Filling out the map grids definitely has a direct correlation with gaining more reef blocks. As such, the clearest route to completing the game lies in traversing as much sea mile as possible to actively explore the mysteries of the ocean. So, in other words, travel the seas to fill out map grids. Fill out map grids to gain reef blocks. Gain reef blocks to expand artificial reef. Expand artificial reef to max out the fish population. Max out the fish population to see something special happen. That sounds simple enough, doesn't it? And it is. Our playtime will predominantly remain at the first step of traveling the seas to fill out map grids. Just leisurely cruising around for the sake of it. Essentially, playing Aquanauts Holiday as we've previously done is how we go about beating Aquanauts Holiday. I sense no great revelation with this insight, no change of how I'm meant to be engaging with the game. Rather, Aquanauts Holiday lends me nothing more than reassurance that I was always on the right track. Don't overthink it, keep on drifting aimlessly. This was always the winning strategy. How romantic. Aquanauts Holiday hands us an oyster of an open world, moderately filled with little of interest, and only asks that we see about enough of it. There's nothing to actively do here in a conventional sense. No quest lines to unravel or checklist logbooks to fulfill. We don't interact with the world in any way that furthers our progress more than mileage. Structurally, Aquanauts Holiday is a game about doing nothing. We are disconnected ghosts in a barren, subaquatic world, cursed to merely observe our surroundings and seance communicate with the fish. The game cannot ascribe any meaning to what we do within it. It refuses to. I suppose it would diminish the point. Instead, we have to provide that meaning ourselves, through actions that feel more real and true to us than any arbitrary rule set ever could. Because we choose and define those boundaries for ourselves. While playing the game, we took interest in the enigmatic landmarks and made it our task to discover and mark as many of those as possible with the buoys. It's believable that someone else would instead want to observe and catalog the sea life. Maybe document what sounds make them tick. Perhaps another player would do a little bit of both, or a little bit of neither. With enough creativity, you could likely find something else entirely to do. Maybe study topology or something. I don't know. What's important is that because Aquanauts Holiday measures nothing more than map grids, it can make no judgment on how we spend our time. We have to take that task into our own hands. By necessity, completing Aquanauts Holiday practically requires us to take up a bit of makeshift game designing. Our entertainment only happens on our own terms. It remains fun and intriguing for as long as we will it. And then, nothing holds us back if we lose interest. I understand that this means fully engaging with Aquanauts Holiday demands a slight dose of uncynical, childlike joy, an appreciation for non-productive simplicity, you could say. It's not like other games, no. I certainly don't think it's for everyone. Safe to say, its disinterest with conventional structures is jarring in a landscape so preoccupied with action and progress. We have to meet the game halfway to taste its magic, and that might be difficult, but when we do, it acts as a blissful detoxing of medium expectations. I mean, why does a game have to be about anything at all? Can't we just appreciate a moment in its simplicity for simply being a moment? If there is no greater intent here than to be a relaxing experience, I think Aquanauts Holiday works wonders. Because this dedication to nothingness is relaxing. The absolute lack of requirements is peaceful. I adore seeing a game so rebelliously renounce the essence of its form, and in the process emerge as a perfect monument of minimalism, so divine in design that it forces us to redefine what a game even is. Through its sparse makeup, Aquanauts Holiday cuts away the components of traditional game design to reveal the glowing core underneath. We must contribute a little piece of ourselves when playing any game, but here we must do so independently, without being asked first. We are given one cryptic carrot at the end of the road, but otherwise we have to create the rules of entertainment ourselves. We can only sincerely explore this world and appreciate its wonder if we decide that it is wondrous and worthy of exploring. I have to declare, without extrinsic rewards, that the sights and discoveries still are meaningful to me. Why else would I play the game? Cruise around, fill out map grids to obtain reef blocks. It's such a banal task that it would be silly to even approach head on. The best opportunity of intently gaming the system is to simply propel the sub in different directions while doing something else in the background. I mean, that's so pointless, it's borderline brilliant, isn't it? That the most efficient way of reaching the elusive ending is to just not play the game at all. In fact, the slightly updated version of the game, Aquanauts Holiday Memories of Summer 1996, adds an idle autopilot mode that controls the game for you. Leave it on overnight and you'll win, genius! What then? Evidently, Aquanauts Holiday does its best to discourage players from taking cheeky shortcuts and abusing its design. It's actively hard to gamify it too much. For example, while the map is an integral part of charting our progress and getting a grasp of the world, it's too impractical to actively use. If I want to fill out a moderate square for the grids, I need to painstakingly release buoys to return where I was, adjust my angle based on the compass, and continuously wait for the transition between the sub-view and the map view. It is more cumbersome and time-costly than simply not doing it. You can just head off in some direction and fill out more map grids in a fraction of the time. This equally means that we can never grow too reliant on the map, because it represents too much of a break from the action to be effectively consulted. In turn, Aquanauts Holiday retains its air of mystique by never lending us a firm grasp on where we are. It's designed for us to get lost, to keep us focused on exploring our surroundings in an immediate way. By fumbling in the dark with an indirect map, we never run the risk of boiling down our place in the world to a dot on a grid. We have to navigate from the view of the submarine. We are here and now, so the illusion remains intact. This dedication to always keeping the player focused on engaging with the world at the base level is commendable, and certainly one of the factors for why the game remains intriguing long after we turn it off. By definition, Aquanauts Holiday is an open world game, insofar that we are let out into an open landscape without any arbitrary restrictions on what to do or where to go. By this metric, it's arguably the golden standard for this kind of game design. Open world games are a bit infamous for ending up so preoccupied with following objective markers on minimaps that the elaborate world around us disperses, reducing it to the empty spaces between A and B, rather than a sincere playground for spatial exploration. I believe these criticisms led people in 2017 to rightfully praise Breath of the Wild for its natural use of vantage points to spot and chart out points of interest. The game confidently fostered intrigue in its world by filling it with genuine landmarks you'd actually want to go off and explore. In other words, instead of telling the player where to go with a waymarker, Nintendo decided to make the world compelling enough for players to want to explore it by their own accord. 22 years before that, Aquanauts Holiday went even harder on this idea by only letting players see what's right in front of them and only being able to put waymarkers in places they've already been. Since we have a laughable draw distance, we can't know what awaits us in the distance, unless we go there to see for ourselves. Since there is nothing to actively do or accomplish within the game's rules, there is nothing much to gain from releasing those buoys except revisitation. The only action we do is explore, and the only reward we receive are immortalized memories. Where every other game of its ilk will place down markers and fast travel locations to keep track of unfinished business, Aquanauts Holiday encourages us to chart our lived experiences. Precisely because Aquanauts Holiday embraces this sort of obtuseness, we found that it's a splendid game to replay. Even though you eventually may sort of remember the general layout of the land, we can never retain our exact bearings for long, and sooner or later we will end up lost in the wet wilderness. No matter how much we learn about this game and feebly demystify its world, the presentation will eventually envelop us with its transfixed wonder. Even though it may first seem so, this is not a dull place to revisit, because through vast simplicity, it's virtually never-ending and never-changing. I can never be too certain of where I am or if I've seen all there is to see. The mystery still remains. And I think that constitutes a resounding notion at the core of Aquanauts Holiday, that when playing this game, we have to make peace with the idea that we will not see everything. How could we? The game packs it up after we've barely done a modest bit of surface scratching. There's nothing to formally collect and gain here after the reef is done, so to speak. There is no extra mile to walk. There is no way of 100% completing Aquanauts Holiday, whatever that would even entail. Thus, just as we had to meet the game halfway to humor its wonky free-form rule sets, we must likewise part with it halfways, when it can grant no satisfying reward for ultimate discovery. That's something we need to define for ourselves, and it's not particularly difficult. If we accept any sort of new discovery as sufficient enough, Aquanauts Holiday will remain rewarding for long-time players way past the initial formal finish line, precisely because there's no firm metric for seeing everything, or sensible method for even attempting to do so. Sticking with the game will only yield more and more discoveries, until it's hard to even know what's actually in the game or not. Like, this guy on GameFAQs outright praises Aquanauts Holiday, with his sole gripes being that it's definitely underrated. Which is a non-issue really, and he also says that there are no dolphins. So confidently declared too. But that's false! There definitely are dolphins in the game. Of course there are, you can spot them all over, but the easiest place is this reef in the northeastern corner of the map. It's one of my favorite spots in the game actually. Quite underrated. I recommend you go check it out. You'll know when you find it. Because it has the dolphins. For these reasons, I do not dare speak strongly about the absence of, for example, orcas, Kiki's favorites. We've never seen them during our many hours of play, and for non-specific reasons, I'm fairly positive they're not in the game. But how could I know for sure? This fellow Aquanaut lover was so certain there were no dolphins. What if we too had been eluded by our beloved orcas? In the same vein, there's supposed to be a UFO in the game. I know this for a fact. Here's what it looks like. How peculiar. Where is it? How do I find it? I don't know, and at this point, God, I don't even think I want to find it. I'd rather keep this one part ephemeral, to reassure us that there is more to be found out there. Because if the UFO remains undiscovered, then so must other unspeakable sights. How romantic. It's safe to say that this magical sense of wonder could only emerge from a strict dedication to minimalist design philosophies, where huge chunks of the experience are intently obfuscated and scattered to the tides. At first glance, the simplicity of Aquanaut's Holiday may appear frivolous, naive, primitive, maybe even a bit amateurish. But under closer inspection, we find it works wonders in the game's favor, forfeiting norms and conventions to impress upon us the illusion of a vast and bountiful ocean. Your enjoyment will rely heavily on whether you accept and buy that illusion or not. But if you do, a wonderfully enchanting experience awaits you. By all rights, this peculiar title should be regarded as a forgotten classic, an underappreciated step in game history, displaying the unique artistic strengths of its medium in a time of great change. The game has all the means for this to happen, yet I don't get the impression it has that reputation. It mostly seems to be just forgotten. Maybe because it requires too much patient goodwill from the audience. You could speculate on these matters for hours, but it's not important who does or does not discover this hidden brilliance. What's more interesting is that despite being such a pioneer of the underwater exploration pseudo-genre, Aquanaut's Holiday evidently did not make a huge impact on its peers, a fact that has tragically made it all the more unique and non-conventional with time. Even though it bursted with such confidence, no lessons were learned, and no strides were made. 30 years on, this strange game remains as solitary and lonely as it always was.
Part 2. Point Nemo. There will never be another game like Aquanaut's Holiday. Quite a bold statement, I know. To elaborate, after our lengthy aquanautical holiday, we found ourselves with an understandable thirst for more. Luckily, Aquanaut's Holiday is far from the only game where you leisurely float around in the deep sea. There are actually all kinds of games that fall under that umbrella. In that sense, Aquanaut's Holiday is far from unique. It's not the first game to do the whole three-dimensional underwater exploration shtick, and neither is it the only one of that ilk on the PlayStation. Heck, it's not even the only Aquanaut's Holiday game. However, the more titles we checked out, the more disillusioned we grew. Despite the breadth of options, nothing could quite scratch that Aquanaut's Holiday-shaped itch. And not for lack of trying. We played practically everything we could get our hands on, quickly solidifying our observation that, indeed, nothing is quite like Aquanaut's Holiday. Now, what does that mean? It's certainly not a malicious declaration that everything else sucks. Do or die, be like this or perish. Right, It's simply a surprising twist of events when approaching this hyper-specific subset of games after falling in love with one of its earliest progenitors. Underwater games come in all shapes and sizes, even discounting the fact that most submarine simulators are about warfare, there's still a hearty mix. You play Diver's Dream and harpoon sharks in caves. You play Everblue and salvage garbage from the ocean floor. You play Endless Ocean and poke and touch and prod at all the fish. You play Bioshock and hang on, this is a shooting game. Examples abound, but even if you look at the most similar ones, as in games where you explore open underwater areas at your own leisure, we still discover a substantial departure from the core principles of Aquanauts Holiday. Why is that? Did they intently try to iterate on something already established or unwittingly invent the same wheel? Does any other game even want to be like Aquanauts Holiday? Well, without straying too far away from our main subject, I suppose the best case study would be its closest relative, Aquanauts Holiday 2. Released exclusively for the Japanese market in 1999, Aquanauts Holiday 2 is in many ways the closest we ever got to a proper Aquanauts Holiday 2. Taking heavy cues from its older sibling, this sequel has all the ingredients to both look and sound like the original, the makings of a worthy follow-up. Everything is here. We cruise around in a submarine through tranquil waters, discovering lost treasures and diverse species of fish. We dispatch fast travel buoys, consult our map, and sing with the surroundings. This is unmistakably an Aquanauts Holiday game. However, and I don't want to sound like a pissy bitch here, but it doesn't feel right. Something is off. And I'm not talking about the jarringly bright shade of blue, neither the needlessly sensitive and convoluted new control scheme, even if that would be kind of a barf bag deal breaker for me. Oh god. Fuck. Rather, Aquanauts Holiday 2 has a much more deep-rooted, sinister streak. New for this installment is a little targeting system that hones in on nearby subjects and allows you to scan them in order to make an encyclopedia entry. Each entry in turn fills out a line in your exploration catalog. It's simple, innocuous, and sacrilegious. A tiny addition that upends the core structure of the game and irrevocably alters how we play and engage with it. For lack of a better term, this fully and properly gamifies Aquanauts Holiday in accordance to conventional norms once and for all. This new scan task becomes a great preoccupation for us as players, because out of everything you can get up to, cataloging is seemingly the most straightforward productive act within the game. How can it not be? You're checking boxes in a list working towards completion. And since this system integrates with practically everything and anything of remote interest in the world, it's easy to find yourself going ham on the scan button harder than Samus Aran. Curiously, this in turn fosters a binary view on our surroundings, familiar and unknown, scanned and not scanned. The latter will most likely make itself more appealing, as anything previously discovered practically loses any and all utility if it's already been recorded in our catalog. A brief moment of novelty before we exhaust our subject into an empty husk. Seen this, done that, better look elsewhere. Again, I don't want to be overly dramatic over such trivial matters, but I think this perfectly exemplifies everything Aquanauts Holiday was going for with its unconventional obtuseness. That once you take that same mold and further gamify it, we end up with a fundamentally different experience. In contrast with the previous title, Aquanauts Holiday 2 is upsettingly pragmatic. We can now swiftly access a map with the press of a button, allowing us to carefreely circle around, filling out grids like nothing. The world is divided in smaller regions, connected through tight passages, making our surroundings feel cramped and more easily navigable. We are given no chance to get truly lost, no breathing room to wander. Diligent players can efficiently fine-comb regions and fill out their individual catalog sections, granting us a firmer seat that a substantial chunk of the game has been fully uncovered and untangled. What is there left to explore in a space that has declared itself finished? The binary state has been toggled on a grander scale. Don't waste your time. You're done. Get productive elsewhere, nerd. For these reasons, I'd argue Aquanauts Holiday 2 constitutes the polar opposite of the original Aquanauts Holiday. Despite their many similarities, they condition players to engage with them in vastly different ways. Even if they both maintain some form of obtuseness and mystery, the second game's world only keeps shrinking the more time we spend in it, because it gladly exposes itself to us in cold numbers. We can put a percentage value on how much we've seen, how much inventory there's left to tag. It's a cynical view, yes, but I think it's a justified response in contrast to how carefully the original game tried to make us second guess its full scope. As a result, I spend no more time here than I need to. I didn't even bother filling out the entire catalog. It just ended up feeling like a chore. You don't even need to do it to reach the end. You simply enter a hole and the credits roll. It's over here, right here. I think you like time travel back to the ancient past or something in the last few areas. It's a bit vague, but you can tell by the fauna. I tried speedrunning this and casually finished the trip in around half an hour. I guess I've got the world record. Think you can beat me? As such, Aquanauts Holiday 2 leaves no lasting impact. It's not a bad game by any stretch, it's alright. I like the crunchy fidelity and Y2K aesthetics. I like the new monuments. There's a part where you go through an ancient man-made tunnel which is cool as all hell. You can surface at select points and spectate the world above the waves. There are even orcas. Is that enough to win me over? Partly yes, but ultimately I'm sadly not too impressed. Aquanauts Holiday 2 takes the same ingredients as the first game and bakes a different cake out of them. If the question is what it means to be like Aquanauts Holiday, this game demonstrates what it means to not be Aquanauts Holiday, showing that it's not only about aesthetics, setting, or premise. What Aquanauts Holiday achieved relied on a defiance of medium conventions. When we add simple progression systems and finish lines, all of that disperses, leaving us with yet another ordinary game like so many others. I find this perfectly encapsulates a recurring trend in our search for more Aquanauts Holidays. Our thirst is not quenched by surface level similarities, and each new venture solidifies that Aquanauts Holiday was about more than that. Truthfully, it didn't even need to be set in the ocean. We just enjoyed engaging with something atypical that questioned our understanding of games and left a strong sense of calm and relief in its wake. When we move on to the PlayStation 3 installment, Aquanauts Holiday Hidden Memories, the same patterns repeat. Suddenly, we must speak to characters on the radio, buy equipment upgrades, complete missions, and unlock new areas. There's a detective mystery at the core of this narrative. Colin Baker talks to you about worms, and once more, every fish in the ocean needs to be scanned. It's still vaguely Aquanauts Holiday, but as interpreted through years and layers of iteration. The strange landmarks are mundanely explained to us, buoys are a scarce commodity, and the sonar has been transformed into a memorization rhythm game that connects to a skill tree. When the meme pool becomes full, mount it on the meme panel. It's a funky and bizarre contrast. It's new, but it's also something completely different. Wherever we turn, this keeps happening. Diver's Dream centers around the treasure hunt and has a stronger lean towards action. Blue Legend of Water has you solving puzzles with your lovable dolphin buddy and hanging out with the staff at a sea base. Everblue is mostly about resource management whenever you're not hustling in a tourist town. Endless Ocean focuses heavily on cataloging, with a framing that is wordy and a bit overbearing, making sure to elaborate every last detail and placing awkward boundaries on exploration, etc, etc, it goes on. Coming from Aquanauts Holiday, with its scaled down design and dense atmosphere, this creates a strange sort of whiplash. I presumed these games would lean in their own directions, that some would be more conventional than others, but it was surprising how stark the contrast actually was. It turns out adding just about anything on top of this minimalist foundation creates a distinctly different expression, one that leaves me with another impression altogether. These games should carry that Aquanaut gene I'm after, but they're also diverse that they barely resemble each other. For example, while seemingly similar on the surface, the Konamicas in Diver's Dream ultimately has little in common with Aquanauts Holiday, apart from its setting, free movement and rich soundscapes. Diver's Dream has you manage equipment and resources, solving little puzzles and surviving perilous scenarios. It's actually kinda great and I absolutely recommend you check it out. It even has a peaceful free mode where you can swim around an open area and hang out with the sea life. By all means, this is exactly like Aquanauts Holiday. However, I think it lacks the scope. Ultimately, this bonus mode comes off as a cute tangent to an experience that otherwise is a lot more than this. The same applies to the free mode in something like Subnautica, or booting up that new Endless Ocean and ignoring everything around you. It's all secondary to something grander that involves a lot more moving parts. Aquanauts Holiday, on the other hand, doesn't have the story mode where you kill sharks, rescue divers and outswim lobsters. The subdued minimalism is the main selling point. It's everything it has to offer. This is all it is. I think it's that sort of uniquely characteristic vision I'm after more than anything. It doesn't have to literally be the same as Aquanauts Holiday. Maybe I just want a singular focus. In desperation, my routes get more obtuse. Finny the Fish in the Seven Waters maybe will do something for me. Shamu's Deep Sea Adventures, why the heck not? Jaws Unleashed, yeah, I could go for some violence right about now. No. We need more tranquility. Here's Jellyfish, the Healing Friend, a game where you buy a pet jellyfish and take care of it like a squiggly Tamagotchi, which instantly brings to mind the ridiculous pet simulator Seaman.
Excellent. You know I love the ladies.
Shut the fuck up. Does Fin count? Since they're half dolphin? What about Electroplankton? A stylish game where you manipulate microorganisms to sing and perform music in intricate systems. This oddly befitting blend of sea life and music production naturally leads me to the PlayStation gem Fluid, where we sequence electronic beats and loops to accompany a dolphin's metaphysical journey through the cosmos. Eventually, I end up scratching my head over the funky Sega Saturn software Aquaworld and its jigsaw puzzle spin-off before I give up. The vibes are all there. We love esoteric beauty on this channel, but perhaps sliding ever further into obscure weirdness is not gonna be the key. After all, that's not everything Aquanauts Holiday had going for itself. In 1995, the gaming medium saw the unconventional submarine exploration game Aquanauts Holiday and allowed it to remain a peculiar one-time occurrence. this doesn't mean that there are no other games that accomplish similar feats. Far from. I have always adored the criminally underappreciated Mega Drive classic Echo the Dolphin and its world-class sequel, The Tides of Time, precisely for their refreshing disregard for contemporary conventions. Echo excels with an aesthetic commitment to naturalistic simplicity that was far ahead of its time. It expertly used its setting to try outlandish design ideas that remain novel to this day, all wrapped in a blanket of dense, deep-sea atmosphere. Arguably, the game that would best resemble Aquanauts Holiday on an ideological level might very well be Echo the Dolphin, with its ludicrous psychedelic sci-fi presentation and unconventional design sensibilities. But that's also the crux. Echo is a linear, surrealistic platformer, and Aquanauts is a minimalist, open-world exploration game. Polar opposites that take equal space in my heart. They may both celebrate the vast mystery of the ocean, but in every other aspect they are night and day. I understand how unreasonable all of this may sound. I played a game whose entire conceit is how unconcerned it is about being a game, wanted more like it, and then got disappointed when all other games I tried were indeed structured like games. That's my fault. It's all on me for having such lofty expectations. Truthfully, I shouldn't even be playing video games to get my fix. My desires are likely better met in other mediums. The search must broaden. I could listen to some ocean-evocative favorite albums like Sargasso Sea, Flood, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, Ocean Rain, or, of course, The Mollusk. But I suspect cinema will provide a more immersive, sensorial experience. So, that's my next venture. I go back to watch the 1988 film The Big Blue, a childhood favorite. Of course I rewatched Wes Anderson's 2004 magnum opus, The Life Aquatic. Good films, on point with the theme, but doesn't carry the same kind of dedication to sparseness that we're after. Perhaps the realm of non-fiction will serve us better. No need to beat around the seaweed, I suppose. We go straight to the cultural sauce and watch the works of French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau. Now, if you're not familiar with Cousteau, he was a world-famous maritime researcher and filmmaker, prolific in all sorts of projects throughout the last century. A lot could be said about the man, enough to fill an entire video of its own. In short terms, he's the reason why everyone is wearing red hats in The Life Aquatic, why there was a base underwater in the abyss, why that kid wanted to free Willy, and why everyone speaks French in The Big Blue. Important for today's discussion are his 3 feature-length nature documentaries that encompass 2 decades of his career. From the 1956 The Silent World, which captures his questionable early methods like bullying animals and blowing up coral reefs to study dead fish. Yes. For the record, he figured out animal rights after this. To the subdued and mellow 1976 Voyage to the Edge of the World, chronicling a perilous expedition to Antarctica. In particular, the 1964 film World Without Sun caught our eye through its surprisingly familiar premise. Documenting the experimental Conshelf 2 project, the film follows a team of underwater scientists, so-called oceanauts, as they spend a month under the sea to conduct their research. One need not take more than a cursory glance at this description to draw strong parallels with Aquanauts Holiday, a game that carries a suspiciously similar synopsis. In fact, the manual's extensive description of the faceless protagonist is a dead ringer for Jacques Cousteau himself.
You are the world's foremost marine explorer. Your face and name are recognized around the globe. As the senior researcher of an elite oceanographic institute, you're at the pinnacle of your profession. Because of you, the seas and all life within them are safer, healthier, and highly respected. Your discoveries have molded the way scientists and society view the ocean and its ecology.
It doesn't feel like a stretch to suggest that Aquanauts Holiday possibly could have taken some inspiration from Cousteau's work, in particular the film World Without Sun. It's a perfect parallel. The similarities are precise enough that we might as well argue Aquanauts Holiday is a video game adaptation of World Without Sun. The predominant focus of the film is exploration of the world under the sea, featuring fascinating views at exotic species and their habitats. The researchers head out into the sea in search of discovery, seemingly finding something new and exciting around every corner. At the tail end of the film, Cousteau himself embarks in a submarine for a deep-sea voyage, encountering alien landscapes and strange fauna, before exploring an undersea cave. The understated presentation of these endeavors are a microcosm of the Aquanauts Holiday experience, discovery for the sake of discovery itself. Through the film screen, we are lended a window into a foreign world and expected to find novelty in these visions alone. When Cousteau and his team realized the documented Conshelf 2 project, it was with the intention of streamlining their work process by keeping researchers closer to their subaquatic environment. Without need for decompression periods and the risks they carry, the crew would be able to spend more time on the research, free from constant interruptions. In turn, the very purpose of this undersea base softly reverberates in the pace and structure of Aquanauts Holiday, unintentionally exemplifying what sets the game apart from its peers. Games like Aquanauts Holiday Hidden Memories, Endless Ocean, Everblue, and Diver's Dream recurringly ask the player to abort their current expedition so they can re-emerge and spend time away from the sea. Maybe they completed a mission, or maybe they need to park their boat elsewhere. Inevitably, this will involve a little bit of small talk about the weather, commonly some gear upgrades, perhaps a snack run to the store. Approaching these games from the angle of Aquanauts Holiday makes their pacing come off as a bit awkward, perhaps even unnecessary. I find that despite however exquisite the underwater simulations may be, the illusion easily falls apart whenever the games try to replicate the human downtime element, dividing the experiences into two distinct halves that have little interplay and mostly helps to control the player's interaction. Sitting through these mandatory intermissions makes me yearn with insatiable thirst for the endlessly lengthy introspective ventures of Aquanauts Holiday. Unexpectedly, I find myself identifying with Cousteau's longing for an undersea base, free from the restraints of text box decompression chambers and story-mandated surface dwelling. I suddenly understand what Aquanauts Holiday was going for with its unorthodox pause menu. The so-called extended screen emulates the ease of operating from a real underwater base. Of course we have to return to our personal Conshelf to consult the map, design the artificial reef and record our progress. Of course this is why we can't resume progress from where we were, but instead have to embark on a new voyage. Aquanauts Holiday has the same sort of simulated downtime moments as its brethren. It's merely expressed through the players themselves. It is a simple but brilliant solution. Instead of trying to replicate the full scope of marine research life by hopelessly simulating artificial downtime periods, Aquanauts Holiday understood that the human element was always brought by the player. The pause menu is our base. It's where we return when we ourselves need to take a little break. Our downtime is in perfect sync with the game, so the illusion remains unfazed and consistent. The immersion is never broken. Just like how Aquanauts Holiday never indulges in off-site tangents, or ever allows the player to re-emerge their submarine, World Without Sun shares this complete dedication to its subaquatic setting. Every scene in the film is set under the sea, with only faint glimpses of the surface world through hazy television monitors, or shots of the sun breaking through the waves above. I believe this uninterrupted peak of the ocean helps maintain an otherworldly quality to both works. The ceaseless focus strengthens the portrayal. What we see is as important as what we don't see. In Aquanauts Holiday, we are confined to the ocean, restricted by our submarine. We have no way of directly interacting with our surroundings. Instead, we can only spectate it from a virtual window. Curiously, this mimics the language Cousteau himself would use as a filmmaker. When watching World Without Sun, we take part in a curated sequence of scenes, witnessed by the camera. While we don't see the diving researchers operate cameras wherever they go, we have to logically assume this to be a constant factor of the events on screen. World Without Sun is, after all, a real-life artifact of the expeditions undertaken by Cousteau and his crew. We see what they saw, or more accurately, what they chose for us to see. In this way, Cousteau interacts with the world around him through the gaze of his camera, and in the process of filmmaking, this lends further value to the visions as true and meaningful. That mentality is perfectly replicated within Aquanauts Holiday, where we must make peace with gaze being our only means of interaction with our surroundings. We have to learn that even this most minimal form of interactivity constitutes a form of game, that merely witnessing a scene helps convey it as a tangible replica of undersea life. Undoubtedly, in matters both aesthetically and philosophically, Aquanauts Holiday is cut from a similar cloth to World Without Sun. However, there's still a rift in my interactions with the two. Despite their numerous similarities, watching World Without Sun doesn't fully feel like playing Aquanauts Holiday.
We have lived in the bosom of the sea. The sea has indulged us.
I suppose Cousteau's lengthy narrations somewhat grounds the film in safe, earthly familiarity, and the many scenes of half-naked smoking Frenchmen on the base ironically constitutes the same form of awkward human interruptions as all of those other undersea exploration games. Although, maybe what those games all needed was a cheeky parrot. In search for something that actively eliminates the overbearing presence of mankind, we watched Luc Besson's 1991 film Atlantis, an atmospheric musical exploration of the world below the waves, compiling candid nature footage into little micro-narratives. For this, we found a Japanese laserdisc rip on the Internet Archive, which felt decidedly on point, the ideal experience. This is how it was meant to be seen. Now, in comparison to your average nature documentary, what makes Atlantis immediately stick out is its distant presence. The film is practically void of any voiceover apart from its brief opening narration, one which deliberately implores the audience to leave our contemporary existence in human civilization behind to return to our subconscious roots in the cradle of life.
Forget everything that you know and dive deeper and deeper.
This curiously beckons the same sentiment that was used to sell Aquanauts Holiday, to leave the stress of everyday life and take a relaxing stroll in the sea. The opening shot even looks vaguely familiar. It's a promising start, and in concept, we can't help but adore Atlantis. It's a good watch, quite peaceful, but I don't find its approach to sensorial escapism fully convincing. The ensuing program certainly indulges in non-verbal appreciation of the ocean's beauty. However, diligent use of dynamic shots, snappy cuts, and emotionally leading music keeps me blatantly aware of its authorship. From explicit acknowledgements of the fourth wall, to strange anthropomorphization of the fauna, the film never truly fulfills the promise of letting go of our surroundings and embracing the ocean. Instead, it remains married to conventionally familiar elements like pacing and narrative. This makes it sound like I hate pacing and narrative. Perhaps most gaudy is the oddly erotic episode which combines footage of animals mating with a funky song about lovemaking. Don't get me wrong, this is great, gave me a good chuckle, but it nevertheless demonstrates the challenge of directing an experience that remains immersively otherworldly without calling attention to its own nature. That's the crux about escapism. We must willfully participate in escapism for its effect to take hold. However, I have a hard time wholeheartedly engaging with it from that angle. I suppose Aquanauts Holiday simply spoiled us with its understated hands-off approach. Nothing has ever been quite as effective. Maybe nothing ever will be. If something so pared down as Atlantis still leaves me dissatisfied, where can our search even move on? At the end of the day, what works like Atlantis or World Without Sun lacks in contrast to Aquanauts Holiday is that tranquil, hypnotic element, something that keeps the immersion ceaseless and endless, a bold appeal to minimalism that transforms the view of undersea life from mundanely conventional to abstractly confrontational. I need a film that makes me question the very boundaries of the medium in the same way Aquanauts Holiday challenged our conceptions of interactivity in games. Hang on. Oh no, wait. It's Aquarium Tapes. I want to watch Aquarium Tapes. What the fuck? No, we can't stoop to this level. Back when home video was still a profitable commodity that ordinary people would pay for, there evidently was a bit of a push from distributors to expand the potential market. Typically, the VCR was used to play films or TV shows, but technically it had the potential to display any sort of linear visual material. This is presumably how we got peculiar releases like Fireplace Tapes, or indeed Aquarium Tapes. I say presumably because apparently this subject is so poorly documented that I could conduct no research at all on it. Where did it come from? Who was the first to do it? What was the motivation? Heck if I know! And for anyone who was around in those days, it's not hard to see why this historical blind spot would occur. These releases were the tippy-top peak of tacky kitsch, the sort of nonsense your friend's new age mom would put on while doing aerobics or something.
I mean really, what sort of excuse is this for a fireplace if it carries none of the heating utilities of a real one?
I agree, Grandpa. Now let's go chop some wood together in the forest, like we always do. You get the gist. Back then, my only exposure to Aquarium Tapes was passive material for display TVs in electronic stores. I don't know anyone who seriously used them, let alone had one. I imagine it would be a point of intense ridicule and bullying.
Like, come on, get a real aquarium, bro. Why settle for facsimiles like we're peddling robot animals in Blade Runner? It's the 90s. You don't need this crap.
Well, a lot of time has come and gone since those bygone days. I now find myself living in a cyberpunk dystopia where a proper VHS aquarium is as rare as a live owl, where global warming has made it hot enough that a fireplace without the heat seems desirable. Today, I am your friend's new age mom, doing tarot readings, keeping energy rocks, and wearing whatever the fuck this is. I just listen to Cocteau Twins instead of Enya. Deal with it. Why shouldn't I get myself an aquarium tape as a little treat? But alas, such luxuries are beyond me in a post-VHS society. I now have to settle for the higher fidelity but lesser authenticity Aquarium DVD, which I got for practically free at the local thrift store. after I threw it in with a bunch of other films like was buying pornography, because apparently I'm still really self-conscious about my image. So here it is, DVD Aquarium, a product as inconspicuous as its packaging suggests. You get 3 different aquariums, each clip running 20 minutes for a total runtime of an hour. These are exactly what they're advertised as, static shots of a fish tank. That's it. As our good old friend Mark C would have put it, imagine a DVD of having nothing to do except sit around and look at the pretty fish. Evidently, this is meant to be a passive element of your life, about as entertaining as wallpaper. Put it on and let it run in the background. Roleplay that you have an aquarium and throw the fishes a little loving glance every now and then. Maybe leave it on at a house party as a mood piece. Maybe it can stimulate the cat. The purpose clearly seems to be as a simple substitute for a real aquarium. As the back cover puts it, the fishes never need feeding, nor does the aquarium ever need cleaning. Needless to say, DVD Aquarium is ultimately a harmless novelty that serves no other purpose than its unobtrusive presence. It exists as a corporate product. It has so little artistic value that no person is credited for its inception. It may be packaged like a movie, but you're not meant to watch it. It's an hour of fish. You're not meant to watch it. But why not? The almost forbidden angle of these tapes was tantalizing to me. They don't exist to be films, yet they are confined within that format. They're intentionally uneventful so as to appear safely predictable. They're lengthy and droning so as to appear seamless for the user. They have no substance, no subtext, no subject. Their sole purpose is to be a fish tank substitute for people who don't want a fish tank. We collectively accept these DVDs as frivolous multimedia backdrop rather than cinema. This is why I find it so intriguing to rebelliously deny such notions, willingly celebrate the sheer mundanity of these products and wholeheartedly engage with them as culture. Because right here, I think we have the best candidate for replicating what Aquanauts Holiday was going for. Maybe engaging with DVD Aquarium as a film will teach us something about Aquanauts Holiday as a game. So yes, I sat down in front of the TV for an hour with this cinematic gem, DVD Aquarium, 2006, Water on Celluloid, directed by Clas Ohlson, I guess. Han var en man av många talanger. I dedicated myself for this task too. I pulled down the blinds, hid the cell phone and gave my full attention to watching. I even picked the version with ambient bubble sounds over the one with classical music, because I felt that would be too much of a distraction. My favorite of the 3 aquariums was the second one. I felt it had a good selection of fish. The terrain was varied, the composition comprehensible, and the lighting didn't reflect anything in the glass. My favorite touch was the wall mural backdrop, which implies the signs of an unknowable man-made structure stretching beyond our view. In comparison, the first aquarium is okay. The fish are bigger and the color soothing, but the surroundings feel barren and the lighting definitely leaves more to be desired. I did not enjoy the third aquarium. The more dynamic camera angle with a narrower depth of field is bold, but doesn't serve a 20-minute runtime. I don't like how the angle puts the surface in such great focus. I find the awkwardly positioned pump exhaust unsightly and distracting. In particular, I don't like that bigger fish loom in the distance as horrifying, unknowable shadows. It's scarier than relaxing. Honestly, I could do without this one. Yes, I'm an Aquarium 3 hater. Hot take, I know. I can't help it. Overarchingly, nothing was learned from this experiment that I didn't surmise in my hypothesis. It did leave me with that same sense of calm as Aquanauts Holiday did. Of course my mind wandered a lot, mostly about what I would write in this segment, about what existed outside the camera's gaze, about the identity of the invisible film crew. I might have been bored from time to time. I felt slight unease towards the end of the first third, when time seemed to drag ever more endlessly. But after that I was at peace. It's rare that I voluntarily sit down for an hour and don't do anything at all. When was the last time you afforded yourself that luxury? Most importantly, what I learned from the experience was what I had suspected all along. Video aquariums are daunting and challenging tests of endurance. Everything that makes them frictionless as passive amusement makes them ferocious as active engagement. It's unavoidable. Here is a film where absolutely nothing happens, where I know from the get-go that nothing will ever happen. The most exciting highlight is when a fish poops 10 minutes in. I would be lying if I didn't admit that some part of me saw the end as the elusive goal, that the hour gong of the clock would represent my merciful liberation. But at the same time, another part of me bubbled with mild excitement over the audacious recontextualization unfolding in front of my eyes. And I know, I consented to this endurance. The experiment is silly and laughable, perhaps even a bit presumptuous. I mean, what do I know? Maybe this is how you were always meant to engage with video aquariums. However, what my little escapade proves without a shadow of a doubt is that these videos only are as frivolous as we will them. Despite being made with little artistic intention, aquarium tapes nevertheless express a certain rebelliousness. They are VHS avant-garde, opposing the conventions of the medium by sharing the same language as boundary-defying art films. Is there a meaningful distinction between this and, say, Andy Warhol and John Palmer filming the Empire State Building for 8 hours? Is it nothing but the authorship? Should I present DVD Aquarium as my ready-made, or argue my viewing session of it as performance art? I'm being 100% serious right now. I found this experience a profound conflict between commodity and artistry. When we watch films, things are supposed to happen, and even when the action slows down, thoughts are exchanged and ideas communicated. But here, all of a sudden, we are left with nothing but texture. Aquarium tapes evoke an uneasiness in us, as we are left unsure how to truthfully engage with them. Do I intently watch the program in its entirety? Should I pause the tape if I need to get up? I certainly won't miss anything, except my own participation. In that ambivalent uncertainty lies the ghost of a meaning. Was the endurance a trial of labor to justify DVD Aquarium to myself as legitimate? The film may appear immovably static and seamlessly endless, but it has boundaries. The definitive runtime is proof of its knowable extent. I find that tangibility comforting. It's partly why I would have preferred a VHS tape of the DVD I got. Mostly because, for some reason, I was terrified that I would keep missing the point where the video clip fades out and restarts, forcing me to watch the entire program 1, 2, or even 3 times too many. In hindsight, I can confirm how ludicrous this concern was. Let me tell you, when you're spending an hour watching this, you will not miss anything new happening, trust me. This is also why I opted for the video aquarium over software like My Aquarium, Elfish, Aquazone, or even the PlayStation Manta demo, because their interactivity make them perpetual looping simulations that fulfill their purpose once my idle hands have finished prodding at all the buttons. I can't really engage with them as more than fiddle toys. Isn't that ironic? That the perfect reflection of a submarine exploration game would be found not in works celebrating the ocean through spectacular voyages and discoveries, but in a claustrophobic exercise in nothingness, and vice versa. Well, it's not too strange. After all, it only highlights the truth that I have always known rested at the heart of Aquanauts Holiday. What this game and aquarium tapes have in common is that defiant disregard for norms and conventions. The actual content is unimportant, I simply love the ocean and chose it as a flavor. If I can argue DVD Aquarium to be some sort of domestically ornamental piece of structural cinema, then I believe my musings on Aquanauts Holiday as a bold and experimental exploration of its medium must carry the same weight.
It's a subversive examination of video games. It's an appeal for the rest of that space to take its ideas and grow stronger. It's an expression of the stagnant crisis that ravages within conformity. Is it modernism? Postmodernism? Post-postmodernism? Anti-game? Anti-art? You decide. If nothing else, I don't think it's merely some quirky relic of early 3D game design. I don't think it's some sort of divine fortunate accident. And I certainly don't think it's unreasonable to believe so.
Part 3. Poseidon.
When you open the Jewel case for the Japanese release of Aquanauts Holiday, you're greeted with a short and concise list of developers, printed on the disc. In 1995, this was quite an unprecedented move, and still to this day, remains unusual. I think it speaks integrity in volumes and exudes artistic pride. The case may only say Art Inc., but here, on the disc, the very vessel for the game itself, we find 9 names, 9 people that actually made it what it was. While we are given a glimpse into the intimate size of this development crew, we are also able to humanize the actual effort behind the game itself. Not shaped by the faceless hands of a company, but by a tiny group of people with real names and clear roles. In larger font at the top, we find one name in particular, credited for original game design: Kazutoshi Ida.
Sega.
Born in 1968, Kazutoshi Ida had some smaller roles in other Art Inc. projects before this, and saw his directorial debut with Aquanauts Holiday. He did not return for any of the Aquanauts sequels. Instead, he followed up this work with the caveman survival game, Tale of the Sun, and then the high-concept god simulator, Doshin the Giant. 2 immensely interesting and important titles that would both require their own videos the size of this one to discuss. Which we will one day. But don't ask about it. This both concise and precise repertoire reveals to us recurring key themes and ideas. Together, these games form a multimedia triptych about the nature of life and humanity. Their unison speaks so much, so loudly, with a naked urgency that feels more primordially real than any other games we've ever played. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's instead focus on what this context lends Aquanauts Holiday: intention. In a 2017 video biography for Toko, Kazutoshi Ida talks briefly about his work in game development and reveals a fascinating boundary that ties them all together.
From the moment I decided I wanted to make video games, I set myself a rule that I would create 3 titles. I don't know exactly why it was 3. Doshin the Giant was my last title. I put all my thoughts and everything I wanted to make in that game.
When Kazutoshi Ida speaks about his games, it is with a calm and humble certainty that fully convinces us that his grand ideas are both sensible and observable within them. Elsewhere in said video, Ida explains that Aquanauts Holiday seemingly gained attention precisely because games without goals were such an unprecedented concept in its day. When people struggled to place the game into a box, when they mocked its lack of conventional structure, when they nevertheless tried to make sense of it, they vindicated what Aquanauts Holiday was: unprecedented, esoteric, and new. Is this barren submarine sim not a game? Or is it rather your preconception of the medium that has just been exposed as narrow and incomplete. Continuing, Ida motivates his intentions behind Aquanauts Holiday through a parallel with art history's evolution towards abstraction, striving to replicate that same process within the game medium. I enjoy this mindset because it frames conventions that had become synonymous with video games as a mechanical equivalent to the figurative. High scores, mission objectives, conflict, failure, goals, action. These imbue games with easily defined purpose, a firm surface to grasp onto, something which we can understand them by. I survive the longest, I collect the most points, I kill the bad guys. These surface level thoughts allow us a comfortable definition to approach games with. They constitute their very form. Take that away, and what are we left with? Nothing? The same? Something else? Something new? Video game abstraction? In a 1996 interview with Japanese magazine Game Hio, graciously translated over on shmuplations.com, Kazutoshi Ida laments the state of the contemporary game industry, observing a push to imitate Hollywood films and desperate attempts to create the next blockbuster. Really funny to already be saying that in 1996, by the way. Oh boy. In contrast to these mid-90s ventures, Ida muses on the games from the Famicom era, describing them with words like half-baked and anarchic, but ultimately unshackled by the relative lack of design norms. Identifying the more experimental nature of games in their infancy, Ida explains that Aquanauts Holiday came from a desire to replicate that sort of dubiousness. To quote Ida further on in the interview,
"In a certain sense, Aquanauts was me taking a shot at the games industry, and it was created out of extreme frustration."
It's fascinating to think of Aquanauts Holiday in this light, that a tranquil game about passivity and aimlessness would have been fueled by raw aggression. It reveals how rebelliousness sometimes must be expressed through the most surprising and unexpected routes. In a medium otherwise essentialized as boyish and juvenile, where counterculture becomes its mainstream culture, well, I suppose subdued fish tank software for grandma is going to constitute some form of radical subversion. By being serene and understated, Aquanauts Holiday demonstrates everything games could be, but seldom are. Maybe because they're rarely allowed to, or maybe no one considered they could be that way. Maybe even because few people actually want games to be like this. I find that rebelliousness lies less in the idea itself, but rather the unwavering confidence in which it is presented. In all matters, Aquanauts Holiday simply is. Without need for explaining itself, without begging players to be patient with it, without demanding some hidden truth to be discovered beneath its surface. Whatever we're expressing in this lengthy video has helped define Aquanauts Holiday as much as the reaction of people who gave it 5 minutes before scoffing and shrugging it off. In the same Game Hio interview, Kazutoshi Ida brings up French artist Marcel Duchamp and how he challenged the dichotomy between artist and audience, saying that instead of art being an object presented by the artist, it is the audience who has to discover the art within said object, that the audience becomes more important than the artist, and that this applies to his intentions with Aquanauts Holiday. In his own words,
"I think that the people who find this game interesting are probably interesting people themselves."
Gosh, wow. We're flattered. Thank you, Ida-san. You're pretty cool too. But kind sentiment aside, this makes it abundantly clear to us that Aquanauts Holiday was overtly made to be discovered, that it's a work intended to be interpreted. We all lead different lives with individual understandings of the world. We have our own relationships to art, And as such, we will all approach a game like Aquanauts Holiday differently. Even disregarding the open-ended nature of the game, every experience will be unique. Because it must be. What the player parses will be a reflection of their soul. As it is with all games. As it is with all art. If one comes out of Aquanauts Holiday bewildered and clueless, there won't be too many questions answered by consulting the words of the developers. There are more interviews with both Ida and the rest of the staff out there. We could go on about little trivia bits from the development. We could examine the journey from the earliest concepts to the final product. We could delve more into the richness of the soundscapes or simulated fish behaviors. But we won't find definitive answers on Aquanauts Holiday itself. What it is and why it is, by what means and for what ends. Only more interpretations, more perspectives. No other source is as revealing of this fact than a curious lecture recording from the 7th of November 2010, where Kazutoshi Ida talks about Aquanauts Holiday 15 years on from its initial release. You can find the DVD ISO on its official website. And it's also re-uploaded on Finji's YouTube channel. Yeah, the guys who published Transparency Favorites, Tunic and Wilmot's Warehouse. They knew what's up. Presented as a sort of immersive multimedia experience of music, visuals, lighting, and narration, Ida sets out to explain the background for his first game. And to begin with, that seems to be what the following 45 odd minutes will entail. Ida defines video games as potent vessels for immersion, the reason for this being their interactivity. The interactivity of games in turn defined as a series of minimal actions. Minimalism to him is defined as repetition and difference. While cracking jokes with the audience and playing around with the sound equipment, Ida explains and exemplifies immersion, interactivity, and minimalism. He talks about the conception of Aquanauts Holiday, how ambience was a key word during development, how the game was imagined as a sort of instant meditation device, to hone in on those established strengths of video games. We get the sense of your average GDC-esque post-mortem discussion, detailing the ins and outs of development, and elaborating the finer points of the game's philosophical intentions. However, before we fully get into the groove of candid Aquanauts Holiday context, something shifts. As soon as Ida has offhandedly brought up the work of Mark Rothko as a poignant example for subjectivity in our perception of art, the introduction is abruptly cut short. All bets are off.
Part 1. 工業社会における芸術概念の拡張.
Oh boy! From here on out, Ida forgoes Aquanauts Holiday as his direct subject, and instead spends majority of the time talking about art history. Chronicling the past century, he talks about a lot of things, practically anything but Aquanauts Holiday. Without being long-winded, the following talk is comparable to your average lecture on modernism and postmodernism. If you've attended any variety of art school, you'll probably be familiar with the points, at least on a rough conceptual level. With a focus on minimalism, Ida begins the history lesson by once more bringing up Duchamp, putting his kinetic art into context before progressively moving forward in time. Pulling out numerous historical examples across different mediums, Ida will occasionally ask about their status as art. Does Pierre Schaeffer's Musique Concrète count as music? Is Nam Yoon Paik's Sen film? Is this art? Ida confronts the audience with a curated selection of works which challenges the forms and definitions of their mediums, and lets the rest remain unspoken. On the surface, this whole act may appear to be some sort of practical joke, avoiding to talk about Aquanauts Holiday to instead indulge in high-concept art shenanigans. God forbid, someone out there would probably call this outright pretentious. However, of course, this is all still very much about Aquanaut's Holiday, just on a grander scope that places it within a new context outside of video games. During the third chapter, Ida brings up the concept of sublimation, roughly meaning to modify something into a new state. In his words, high art is sublimated as entertainment. Ambience has its roots in the postmodern minimalism we have been shown, but with time it evolved to become more palpable. Ida exemplifies this by bringing up John Cage's infamous 433, a modernist composition where the performer plays nothing at all, in turn highlighting the silence surrounding the listener. You've probably heard it before. It's playing in the background right now. Because of the very nature of the composition, Ida appropriately calls 433 the origin of ambient music, which through the years evolved in its shape through artists like Brian Eno. To contrast these roots, Ida placed the 1992 single Assassin by English ambient house band The Orb, mentioning how this music was popular around the development for Aquanaut's Holiday. The half-century evolution from John Cage to The Orb is put into perspective. High art is sublimated as entertainment. Two vastly different but nevertheless related realizations of ambience. The shape is different, but the idea remains unbroken. If there is a central point to the talk, this would be it. Through overt comparisons, it's sensible to argue that Aquanaut's Holiday sublimates the thoughts expressed through the works we've just been shown. That it too is a work of modernist minimalism, functioning as an integral piece of Ida's curated art history. Is this a game? Is this video art? Is this music? Is this film? Through his talk, Kazutoshi Ida makes it abundantly clear that he thinks highly and proudly of his first game. We understand better where he comes from, where his intentions lie. But again, Ida cannot tell us about Aquanaut's Holiday directly, with any form of true authority. He can only attempt to convey the shape of his effort, the reasoning, the catalyst. These explain half the story, but what Aquanaut's Holiday is remains in the hands of the player. No question is answered. The game persists as enigmatically unchanging as it always was and always will be. In his conclusion, Ida quickly reiterates how ideas from the past are handed down to us in the present, before abruptly bringing the subject back to Aquanaut's Holiday. With nigh humorous brevity, he rapid-fires snippets of information about the game, while music starts building up in the background. Ida will continue the struggle of making games. The information becomes increasingly more personal and vulnerable, until Ida is almost singing. Seamlessly, he has begun performing with the other members of his band, Doka P.
ゲーム作りと格闘する日々がもうしばらくは続くだろう。友達よ。
Then, Ida slows down. He talks about looking at Aquanaut's Holiday the day before, about all the names featured on the disc. He reveals a surprising claim that this was in fact so taboo that it ended up being the reason for his departure from ArtInc. But he had wanted his name to remain on the disc, which it ultimately did. And so, in hindsight, 15 years later, the sight of all those names looked like a graveyard to him. Ida concludes, "All works will be posthumous, so I will make a game tomorrow." The concluding words, "chill out or die," fleeting on the projection screen behind him, before fading to end credits that thanks all great artists, human beings, the earth, the space, the god. Kazutoshi Ida. What a fucking guy. As all good artists, he leaves us with more questions than answers. He can give us the context, he can give us the intentions, practically leaving the door wide open. But the reading must come from us. So we'll take what was said and humor the sentiment. Indeed, Aquanauts Holiday is a minimalist video game, descended from other significant works of the 20th century. Pretty self-evident, I'd say. But it's nice to know this is corroborated by the author himself. However, in contrast to the drastic examples presented by Ida, such as a film showing a blank screen or a concert of silence, Aquanauts Holiday has tangible form and certainly abounds with figurative elements. Fish. In one way, this discrepancy can be described as an Orbesque sublimation of those bold ideas into a palpable multimedia format. But on the other hand, we're confronted with an interesting conundrum. What does it mean for a video game to be minimal? After all, video games are a pretty complicated medium, blending audiovisual presentation, extensive coding, and user input. Is this merely a necessary means to an end, like the craft work of a canvas frame or the mechanical operations of a film projector? Or is it a playing field for minimalism to be expressed upon? There has to be a point where we accept the piece as a game and not something else. I mean, what is the most minimal a game can be? Is a light switch a minimalist video game? If not, why not? Does a game require the form factor inherent in being presented on a game system? Are games then ultimately defined by their context? Is minimalism for games found in the presence or absence of interactivity? We harbor all of these questions because the medium is rarely allowed a chance to extensively examine these boundaries. Watching fish tanks for an hour gives us a comprehensive view of animals moving about in a living ecosystem, a candid reflection of reality. There is detail, fidelity, movement. We accept that minimalism emerges beyond these parameters. It is expressed through camera work, editing, narrative, flow, form, or rather, its complete absence. For these same reasons, we believe video games can equally express minimalism in spite of the presence of relatively complicated and structured elements. In a previous Transparency video, we examined the game Pokémon Channel from two drastically opposing angles, one half critiquing it as harrowing, cynical commercialism, and the other half examining the implications of its curiously scaled-down interactivity. Without retreading too much old ground, the main means of interaction with Pokémon Channel comes from zapping channels on the television and occasional on-screen menu prompt. By all means, Pokémon Channel is mechanically more minimal than Aquanauts Holiday, using far fewer buttons and expecting infinitely fewer micro-decisions in the moment-to-moment action. Pokémon Channel makes the fluid maneuverability of the submarine in Aquanauts Holiday look like Sonic the Hedgehog. However, Pokémon Channel is still driven by purpose and clear intent. We have a blatant mission which we work towards at all times to accomplish tasks and receive rewards. The simplicity of its mechanics is overarchingly mitigated by an abundance of goals. In contrast, the lack of goal and utility in Aquanauts Holiday overwrites the relative richness of its mechanics. It makes the lush, detailed world seem empty and barren. It makes our purpose unclear. Aquanauts Holiday expresses minimalism in its very structure, and in turn elicits a form of existential apathy in the player. The effect is tremendous and merciless. What do we do in a world where we can do nothing? Where do we turn to find purpose? Aquanauts Holiday confronts us with this problem, and we must find the answer ourselves. With minimalism, we shave off every superfluous part of the subject until we are left with nothing but its exposed core. We could call it one of humanity's endless methods for pursuing truth. In particular, we believe Aquanauts Holiday's minimalism constitutes a postmodern appeal to the entire video game medium, by addressing their very nature, deconstructing their most normalized definition. Games are made to be won. Games are competition. Games are endurance. Games are conquest. Games are perseverance. Games challenge, and games reward. Aquanauts Holiday doesn't have this, and substitutes it with nothing else. It exists to be static and immovable, a non-existent challenge that cannot be overcome because there is nothing to win. Sure, it will play the end credits FMV after we spend a moderate amount of time with it, but that can barely be conceived as genuine victory. Aquanauts Holiday does not operate on the same terms as the rest of its medium, because it refuses to play by those rules. Defined more by association and presumption than anything else, it assumes a role it should have no right to bear. Central to Aquanauts Holiday is a betrayal of the form of video games, ushering in their death and rebirth. Video games are dead. Long live video games. Our interpretation of Aquanauts Holiday is fairly simple. It lies in that treacherous question of, is this a game? Or rather, the inevitable counterstatement, yes, this is a game. In a way, Aquanauts Holiday sublimates the century-long discourse around Duchamp's fountain. On a smaller stage, sure, but the gist remains the same. The question is not remotely as interesting as the answer. Resistance is stagnation, while acceptance is progress. Because it challenges our preconceptions, broadens our horizons, and suddenly presents us something to gain. Despite being a game where you do little and accomplish nothing, where we observe rather than interact, where we explore wastelands and stare at blank blue screens, it still invites the audience to play. Despite practically renouncing its state as a game, we continue playing. We enact its definition. We forgive its treachery. We allow it to be something to us. Through its very premise, Aquanauts Holiday constitutes a sort of ultimatum dare for the entire medium of video games. Can you sustain this radical departure from norm? Can you abandon everything that makes you yourself? Can you be nothing and express absence? What would happen? Will you grow or shatter? Who will accept you? What worth will you even have if you won't be able to do this one simple task? Only one way to find out. Chill out or die. With 30 years of hindsight, I will have to declare that it worked. Video games survived the strain, their scope expanded, and integrity strengthened. Aquanauts Holiday is a game, a damn fine one at that. It's actually, coincidentally, the best game ever made. And we genuinely believe this broadened horizon was partly attributed to the reception of Aquanauts Holiday. While never the greatest hit, and certainly somewhat forgotten over the years, it has a surprisingly tangible string of impact. Really, you might find this interesting. In 1998, the Japanese artist Osamu Sato released the game LSD Dream Emulator, an imaginative trek into the world of dreams, where players spend long, droning sessions exploring barren environments. With time, the game has grown to become quite a cult classic for its unusual format and esoteric presentation, often praised for challenging the norms and conventions of the video game medium. Playing LSD Dream Emulator recaptures that same hazy meandering as we've come to grow familiar with in Aquanauts Holiday. They are strikingly similar experiences. Comparing the two, it's hard not to suspect some smidgen of inspiration carried over from one to the other. We could speculate at length about this, but it's certainly more telling to simply point out that the credit straight up features Kazutoshi Iida at the top of special thanks, meaning there is a direct link connecting the two. While merely an underground hit, it would be hard to deny the subtle impact LSD Dream Emulator had on further games and media. Its arguably greatest disciple would be the iconic indie grandfather Yume Nikki, another sparse, beautiful exploration of the world of dreams. In Yume Nikki, we do little more than walk around vast, empty environments, observing the surroundings, easily getting lost, before we find something of interest. Despite the long-retained anonymity of its legendary author, Kikiyama, we still know, thanks to an exclusive Toby Fox interview, that the creator of Yume Nikki has indeed played LSD Dream Emulator, making the inspiration anything but incidental. Also, Toby Fox, just between you and me, Aquanauts Holiday is absolutely another pre-Yume Nikki game where you walk around a surreal world and witness strange events. If we count submarines as walking, of course. I mean, you should have just asked about Aquanauts Holiday. That's all I'm saying. Call me. Yume Nikki, in turn, what with it predating even Cave Story, has had both direct and indirect influence on just about any indie game from the last 20 years. Really, Yume Nikki is perhaps the most important game ever made for a myriad of reasons I don't have time to divulge right now. But I digress. At the very least, by virtue of Toby Fox interviewing Kikiyama, we can for certain lock down Undertale as one of the games inspired by Yume Nikki. Thus we are left with a prestigious butterfly effect chain of all-time video game classics. Aquanauts Holiday helped lead the way to a game you might have heard about, to a game that you've probably heard about, to a game that you've definitely heard about, all carrying grand ideas and concepts that were sown all the way back in Aquanauts Holiday. Of course, there were influences and inspirations for Aquanauts Holiday too. Iida mentioned early experimental Famicom era games for one. Then there was that entire art history lecture. There's also an interesting section in the Aquanauts Holiday visual book, Another Blue World, where the developers list some of their influences, which includes books on marine biology and programming, a colorful mix of music, the 1991 film Atlantis, little collectible sea life figurines, the brain scan equipment Iida used while playtesting, and a picture of a wife. Nice. The only game here is the interactive CD-ROM Gingerbread Man from experimental music group The Residents, which allows users to digitally prod at visual representations of tracks from said album. No, Aquanauts Holiday did not emerge from the ether. It is merely one link in an ever-expanding chain. However, its contributions are undeniably important and influential. It's a unique video game iteration of 100 pre-existing ideas scattered across all kinds of different fields, which in turn helped introduce and normalize them for this new medium, allowing titles such as LSD Dream Emulator or Yume Nikki to follow in its wake, making its esoteric essence palpable for an ever broader audience, until the trick became old hat, the subversion turned convention. By all means, these games sublimated Aquanauts Holiday, while Aquanauts Holiday sublimated, I don't know, Alien Garden? Today, a game like Be Calm, where you sit in a little boat and watch the world drift by, can release on Steam without garnering much ire or attention at all. Be Calm is magnitudes more minimal and scaled down than even Aquanauts Holiday, yet it's rewarded very positive reviews from people who simply find it peaceful and relaxing. Of course, the not a game conversation rages on forever, but the controversy has simmered down immensely. It is no deal breaker. The audience is there, and they are okay with it. Would we reach this point without Aquanauts Holiday? Maybe. Would evolution happen as soon as it did? Probably not. There's no way of knowing. However, with this compelling evidence, we at least think it would be appropriate to thank Kazutoshi Ida for giving us Aquanauts Holiday, and by process igniting the flame that revolutionized video games, for taking us to a day when this game may even appear safe and unremarkable. Thank you.
Epilogue. Periscope. Aquanauts Holiday still eludes me. Despite having spent so much time playing it, thinking about it for months, and then carefully writing out my thoughts on it, I still believe this game has more to teach me. New perspectives for me to view it from that reach beyond what only one person can perceive. There will always be a new, unique way to approach this game, some previously unthinkable philosophy to recontextualize it. I cannot safely say that I get it, or that I'll ever get it, or that there even is anything to get at all. I've sailed across the seas of Aquanauts Holiday more times than I can count in intricate webs of feeble spaghetti strings, witnessing and experiencing so much, but the mystery still remains. It will never go away. Aquanauts Holiday hides all of its secrets from us, like the unknowable depths of a well. Are the murky waters waist shallow or miles deep? Even if we keep exploring until it seems as if we've run dry, we are still left second guessing, because we can never know for sure. Until at some point we must decide for ourselves that we are finished, maybe through a satisfied declaration or the sizzling slow waning of interest. Sooner or later we let go, with questions left unanswered. Aquanauts Holiday ends in many ways. Either we leave it behind, or it leaves us behind, in our thoughts, in our memories, in our outlook, in the space between us. It ends literally, and it ends figuratively. Let me explain one such ending. As we established in the first chapter, the main metric for Aquanauts Holiday to measure your progress lies in the quantity of travel and exploration, i.e. uncovering blank grids on the map. Keep doing this and you're on the right track. Eventually, you'll have the means to max out that coral reef and hit the end credits. However, this angle of the game actually has a hidden ceiling. It ends. When you've charted about 70% of the map in Aquanauts Holiday, something unexpected happens. And just like that, a wave of revelation spreads over the world, exposing all it touches, filling in all the little gaps and completing the task for you. This seems like a reward. By all means it should be, but the gesture is equally a deceptive knife in the back, because it introduces something new and earth-shattering to Aquanauts Holiday and its world. Completion and dissatisfaction, obfuscation through illumination. It's safe to say that this will not just accidentally happen to players. Rather, it takes a bit of dedication. Reaching 70% map completion is nothing to sneeze at and will supply you with more than enough building blocks to fully populate your artificial coral reef. To get to this point, the player needs to have developed a bit of methodology around their approach to the game, intentionally targeting uncharted areas, moving around in ways that cover as many grids as possible, all for a simple goal: shine a light in the darkness and discover everything. Maybe out of sincere adoration or untamed obsession. Whatever the reason, the game itself intervenes and stops the player through ironic punishment of the most poetic variety. That unflinching conquest ends in Greek tragedy as the map practically burns up in the explorer's hands. The map, an irreplaceable tool, the only guide for showing where we have and haven't been. As it turns out, its unraveling terrains of pretty colors were never the real map, as much as the uncharted void in between was. When Aquanauts Holiday completes the map for us, it removes all indicators of where we have yet to go, all the places where secrets may still be hiding, like the Orcas.
I mean, they could still be out there, I don't know, there's a lot of places I didn't go, I mean, I can't find it now.
This is somehow worse than going back to square one, as what we're left with is less of a map and more of a cold, unchanging slab. A monument to all the hard work. Here rests your progress. You almost got it, but that last 30% was never for you. I half suspect that this peculiar event may be some form of self-defense gesture from the developers, all in the name of maintaining the game's mystique, to stop players from methodically exploring the entire world and declaring Aquanauts Holiday upended and fully sold. Right? What purpose would such an overt ceremony hold other than openly acknowledging the player's actions? Oh, you're trying to fill out the map? Here, let me help you with that. Willfully missing the forest for the trees, essentializing the game as the map and not the world set map shards. With the finesse of a monkey paw, this whole scenario is loaded with as much dark comedy as silent judgment. It's kinda perfect, really. I recall a suspiciously similar moment in Doshin the Giant and feel vindicated. We may talk about that some other day, but for the moment, suffice to say, there's no way that's a coincidence. There's no way this wasn't done at the expense of the player. They knew exactly what they were doing. Now, you might be inclined to laugh at the hypothetical player in this map auto-completion scenario, and it is a funny prank, but I still have to show sympathy. After all, I've been there too. I wouldn't be telling you this story if I hadn't also witnessed it firsthand. Who do you think recorded this footage, huh? I lived it! I had a great time venturing into the ever-shrinking pockets of the world until it was all suddenly taken away from me. Because, let me tell you, it's easy to fall for Aquanauts Holiday's tricks when you don't expect them, that there would even be any tricks to be had. Its true colors aren't shown until this point, after days and days of on and off playing, and then it's only with a brief cruel strike before eternally resuming its stoic composure. I had this sudden gaze at the true depths of the waters, and then immediately fell into its second, bigger trap. I stopped playing Aquanauts Holiday. Not because I got angry or sad, or that I simply gave up after the game permanently broke my navigation tools. No, nothing of the sort. Rather, this was the moment where I knew for sure that I had gathered enough blocks to finish my coral reef. It was time for me to see the ending. It was time for me to be done. It was time for the great abandonment. It's quite a simple ordeal. You throw out colored blocks at random and wait for a while. You can sit on the reef building screen, but I have placeboed that the reef population grows faster when you sit and watch it in real time. Maybe it does. I don't know. But never tell me. I want to keep the few mysteries that I still have. Although, let's be honest, if I don't know, then you probably don't know either. Sorry. And just like that, upon revisiting the reef builder screen, we cut to a fancy FMV sequence. Congratulations, your efforts are rewarded and the sea is filled with life. The creatures in the sea like you, they will always be there, and you can always come back. A present game will be offered with our thanks to the players who have enjoyed Aquanauts Holiday. Please enjoy it. The present game begins after you save the data and choose to quit on the system screen. Jesus fucking Christ. The end credits roll. We see some still shots of the undersea base and a dedication to all good others. Thanks, that's me. The submarine departs once more into the unknown. This is a most understated ending, indicating no more narrative than that of the player's actions. You help the fish, they love you, you love them. Therefore, we get fish mode. An unexpected strange bonus feature that in many ways disarms Aquanauts Holiday of its self-serious characteristic. We get to control the sea life for once, able to flip them around and get a closer look. The dolphin, fully rotatable in my head. This is how I know there are no orcas, and how I know there definitely is a UFO. Being given such a candid glimpse at the game's underbelly is jarring. It's not just a complete fauna gallery, this mode also moves shockingly fast. You can zoom around the world in no time. The fish are so agile they easily get into awkward collisions with the scenery. This is a bit of a revelation. Some of the most common critiques of Aquanauts Holiday revolve around the submarine's controls feeling stiff and clunky. People complain about the slow pace, and I'm sure everyone has noticed the ever-present pop-ins by now. In hindsight, it's easy to brush this off as signs of the time. It was the PlayStation's first year on the market. 3D game design was still being figured out. They couldn't push the hardware more than this. Who wouldn't go for such excuses? Aquanauts Holiday is like this because of ignorance and limitations. It's self-evident. I mean, look at it. The fish are flat and these Lego blocks are somehow supposed to represent a coral reef. However, what fish mode demonstrably shows is that Aquanauts Holiday can go faster, the world can load quicker, and that the developers knew that. Well, I guess the pop-in was unavoidable, but still. This means, without a shadow of a doubt, that the speed and scope of this game is by choice. It has clear intentions that go beyond hardware limitations. Aquanauts Holiday is slow and leisurely because it sells the game's atmosphere. Being deliberate makes our approach relaxed. We don't need twitch reflexes or attention on alert. A slow pace also makes the world bigger, so it takes longer to explore, fueling its mystery. The submarine moves like this because it's simulating a submarine, not a Mach-speed lobster. Also, the submarine actually controls smoothly and reliably as soon as you get used to the controls and logically infer that it has a big hitbox because you're peering out the window of a vehicle. I don't like what they did with the controls in Aquanauts Holiday 2. It's so flimsy and sensitive, it's making me nauseous. Oh god. Oh no. Fish mode is certainly peculiar. It recontextualizes Aquanauts Holiday into some half-baked alternate universe incarnation of itself, where we drunkenly slide around a world whose scope has been severely trivialized. Still not small enough for us to easily see all of it, especially since we have no map or fast travel in this mode. But a far cry from the seemingly endless impression given by its main iteration. We can voyeur the entire fish lexicon at no cost but the dignity of our puppeteered wildlife. By all means, this should feel off base and a bit inappropriate. You might even say it clashes with the sentiment of that previous map unveiling. Like, maybe that was simply an equal gesture, proudly showing off the entire world map, just like we can observe this gay shark from all angles. It's not impossible. However, I find this hypothetical curtain call to be critically incomplete without blunt exposure of the many landmarks, something which is actively hindered by the obfuscation of both the map incident and Fish Mode's lack of navigation tools. It seems, even when Aquanauts Holiday shows everything, it still hides something. The mystery always remains. Yet, Fish Mode nevertheless represented closure for me. The long, peaceful exploration trips I'd been undertaking for several nights in a row had been sabotaged with the loss of my map. The credits had rolled and my reward was Seapunk Camera Mode. For all intents and purposes, I had beaten the game, demystified something that had long eluded me. Finally, I could add the title to some silly media thread and brag about the accomplishment. But something lingered. All of these thoughts and impressions floating around in my head with no outlet. So I quickly wrote a lengthy Tumblr post chronicling my experiences with Aquanauts Holiday and praising all of its intricacies. Yet, that couldn't satisfy my desire for more, and well, you know the rest. One thing led to another. I played some games, got disenchanted, ended up staring at an aquarium for an hour, and now we're here. And that's the thing. I am here writing words in a document. I am here again reading them, when it's not Alicia reading them. I am on your screen repeating them, repeating them, repeating them. I speak about Aquanauts Holiday, yet I am anywhere but there. I am no longer playing it. Why did I stop playing Aquanauts Holiday, a game I enjoyed so much, all the way up until an arbitrary cutoff point? Did this spiral start at Fish Mode, at the coral reef, or the completed map screen? Neither. It all started so much earlier than that. From the moment I started playing, from the moment I considered this a game, from the moment I internalized a fragile understanding of what a game is. I keep thinking about the map filling itself out at 70%. A poetic gesture, no doubt carrying a lesson. The strive is rendered tragically incomplete because the player missed the point. What is the point? You can't understand Aquanauts Holiday more or better by demystifying it. There is no way to truthfully complete such a scaled down and simple game. Then why do I believe it? Why did I take a completed coral reef and the end credits as my farewell? It's not even referred to as the end, just congratulations. The game literally tells me it will always be there and that I can always come back. But I didn't listen. I was too preoccupied with justifying Aquanauts Holiday as a game that I allowed the slightest suggestion of conclusion to become a pitfall for me to carelessly stumble into head first. It made me abandon the game under the pretense that it is a game to be finished. But the ending is only an ending if I want it to be. Did I want it to be? Was I not having fun? Were I gleefully waiting for the hour gong of the clock to bring my merciful liberation? All so I could prove to myself that I overcame the challenge and won Aquanauts Holiday. I like to believe that I had fun. I was amused. Ultimately, I enjoyed Aquanauts Holiday. But I had to get there by making up little rules and metrics for myself. Keep exploring the uncharted areas, send out buoys at points of interest, color code them according to a system, try to find as many landmarks as possible, travel the distance, get the blocks, build the reef, gather the fish, reach the ending, beat the game, abandon the game, be done, play something else. Bomberman Hero apparently. None of this is explicitly expressed by the game. Nothing is mandatory. I didn't have to do this at all. I've always believed Aquanauts Holiday to be a game about nothing, but that was too daunting for me to truly contend with, so I had to create little training wheels for myself to get through the experience. Because it's hard. It's so hard to spend your entire life playing games with the constant conceit of always doing stuff in order to win prizes, and then suddenly not do that. I found an ending only because I desperately search for a goal, without noticing the paradox, the hypocrisy. How can Aquanauts Holiday be a game about nothing if it has an ending? Does the existence of a goal not automatically lend this experience a purpose? But what closure does unlocking fish mode and watching the credits bring? This can only count as the end by conventional expectations, because every other damn game in the world is like that. Big task, big reward, good job. Even if we can contextualize the components in that way, it doesn't make it definitive truth. Aquanauts Holiday is not a linear journey where the far side of the hallway throws you out to start all over again. The only quest was to witness permanence. Despite the credit rolls, the world of Aquanauts Holiday remains as it always was. Apart from the buoys and your relatively small coral reef, the world is completely static. Nothing changes about it. It keeps being there just as it always was. It looked like this and behaved like this ever since the moment when we first began abruptly on a silent scene of blue cliffs. This world is a digital sculpture on an unfathomable macro scale, which we're freely allowed to observe at our leisure. In the shadow of that, the map feels like a museum guide, and the coral reef an attention-grabbing play activity. There is nothing to complete. Almost involuntarily, I strive to find purpose in Aquanauts Holiday and utility in its functions, to create order in its nothingness and shape the recognizable boundaries of a game with set tasks and a goal. I must mark the interesting sights with buoys. I aim to find the correct prompt while communicating with the fauna. I intently cover uncharted sea miles to further fill out the map. I want to see the ending. I don't play this as a game about nothing. I make it a game about something. And then I go on to write at length about it with such confidence and such praise, when I couldn't even fully engage with it on its most simple terms. Here is everything about this nothing. Isn't that something? I dissect Aquanauts Holiday and lay its cold parts on the table to inspect them, figuratively blowing up the coral reef so I can look at the dead fish. Games have conditioned me so much that it's hard for me not to do this. It is hard for me to play Aquanauts Holiday as a meditative experience because I grasp after conventional comfort. This realization is humbling. It's exposing. It's embarrassing. For this reason, the design and structure of Aquanauts Holiday is daring and radical, using me as the audience to exemplify its point. It appears that games are so homogenized that their design standards directly affect how we perceive and interact with any detractors. Even 3 decades later, the trick still works a little too well for it not to be expressing some great unspoken truth. Unlearning our habits and accepting this game on its own merits is as much a hurdle as beating it. You might even say it's the true challenge. But there I go again, trying to conceive it as a game for my narrow conventional framework. It is hard to play a game about nothing and actually do nothing. I seem to be unable to simply exist peacefully within this wondrous silent world, even though I would love to. Can I learn to accept absence as a presence? I'd like to believe I can. So tomorrow, I will play a game. It's called Aquanauts Holiday, and it's a game where you have nothing to do except swim around and look at the pretty fish.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video, there are many more like it on our channel. A special shout out to all of our friends who provided their voices for this project. You should go and subscribe to all of them if you like what you saw here. And while you're at it, I guess you could subscribe to us as well. You might even want to support us over on patreon.com/transparens to gain access to some fancy perks, like our exclusive audio companion podcast, where we discuss the production of our videos in extensive detail. You also gain access to our super cool, super fun Discord server with hyper-specific emotes such as Bubs, Mocky, Duckjuice, Pete Rat, and Ashley Blob. Wow! And of course, you get featured at the end of our videos, just like these lovely people. Acid Shark, All-Purpose Nobody, Afayette, Bibbidi Bitch, Colorado Hugge, Dave Pickett, Dr. Puntgusher Esquire, Dog Snack, Eden Senta, Fran Rogers, Harper, Intungeon, Joy Content, Klaus Morals, Madeline Machado, Matthias Graman, Meowmix64, Mr. Tellius, Mostling, Naive Bayesian, Nishsvert, Paperlanti, Passion Tentacle, Raider of the Stars, Sarah Bloomer, Saxon, Shonald MacDoodle, Synchronize, TB Skyen, Yummy Shaggy,
Once Please 16, Absonod, Alizard, Ali, Anna Day, Anonymous, Aria Soria, Arai, Aurora 42, Bad Wolfos, BK Flash, Blues Piranha, Botch Frivarg, Casio, Charles Goldhaber, Chloe, Comfy Feline, LED Mox, Elliot Diebold, Emma and Pals, Emmy Murphy, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Evelyn, Friend of Dracula, Fjörn, Fungal, Henrik, Hope, Inna and Sinna, Indigo Trans, Ingrid, Yea I Are Not, Yeon Jong, Yay Mission, Yelly God, Jennifer, Kadath, Catherine Jibes, Nave, El Tantavi, Luke Dixon, Marika, Maddie Madkip, Mark Mahan, Miles Seawind, Mitch Haley, Mr. Movie, Neuropain, Nerbion, Quasar Nebula, Robin, Rocky Disco, Sean Wolfbark, Silkmoth, Silly Rookie, Skyhoppers, Sleepy, Sleepy Slug, Soyborn, Surashu, That Queer Birdman, Tiny Sam, Ouija, and Wooftree. We would also like to say hello to these new faces: Bnui, Casey Holloway, Connor, Fluffy, Flowey57, Funky Izzy, Gregory Carlson, Hot Potatoes, Hot Solarium, Mr. Donuts, Robin Forsgren, Sindre Nas, and this is my username 1466. Anyway, I'll take this space at the very end of the video to shout out my own side project that I started this year, called Ashes to Ashley. It's a cute and funny comic about a shoegaze band and what happens when their shy and clumsy guitarist Ash comes out as trans. Wow, look, she's literally me! You can read the first story right now on my Tumblr page, link in description. I'm currently working on the second story, Today Forever, where Ashley gets roped into going on an adventure with the bassist of her band, Debbie. Wow, look, she's literally Alicia. I wonder what's gonna happen. Well, until next time, good night and have a pleasant aquanautical holiday. Bitch.